Container 47 has been on this ship for 3 years, and we've never delivered it. I know because I've been checking the manifests since I started working the MV Pacific Sentinel out of Norfolk. The same orange container, always positioned mid-deck, starboard side, always secured with naval-grade chains, and a seal stamped with the Department of Defense insignia. Row 12, Stack 4, Bay 7. Every voyage, without fail. My name is Danny Pritchard, and I'm a deck officer on what the Navy calls a military auxiliary vessel. Basically, a glorified cargo hauler that transports classified equipment between naval installations along the East Coast. We run a circuit: Norfolk to Charleston, Charleston to Jacksonville, Jacksonville to Norfolk. 12 days per rotation. I've done 47 rotations now, and Container 47 has been part of every single one. The ship's master, Captain Vega, gave me the orientation on my first day. Standard safety protocols, cargo handling procedures, emergency stations. Then he pulled out a laminated card from his desk drawer and slid it across to me. "One more thing," he said. "These rules are non-negotiable. Break them and you're off my ship. No exceptions, no second chances." The card had 7 protocols printed in block letters. I thought it was some kind of hazing thing at first. The other guys ribbing the new hire with fake regulations. But Vega's face was granite. "Container 47? I asked, reading the first rule. "Don't ask questions about it," he said. "Just follow the protocols." That was 14 months ago. Since then, I've watched 3 crew members get dismissed for violating the rules. Torres touched the container door during a storm. Gone the next day in Charleston. Brennan tried to photograph it for his girlfriend. Escorted off the ship by 2 men in suits when we docked in Jacksonville. Lou asked too many questions about the breathing sounds. Transferred to a desk job in San Diego within a week. The breathing sounds. That's what keeps me awake during my off-watch hours. At night, when the Atlantic is calm and the engines drop to an idle rumble, you can hear it. Deep, rhythmic inhalations that make the container's walls flex slightly, like watching someone's chest rise and fall, except the chest is 20 feet long and made of corrugated steel. And it's warm. During my deck inspections, I have to pass within 6 feet of it. Even in January, with freezing rain pelting the deck and ice forming on the railings, Container 47 radiates heat. Not the residual warmth of sunlight. Something else. Something that feels organic, alive, generating thermal energy from somewhere deep inside. Last night changed everything. Last night, I saw what the protocols are really protecting us from. The laminated card lives in my pocket now, edges worn smooth from constant handling. I pull it out during my 0400 watch, reading it again under the dim red light of the bridge. Container 47, mandatory protocols. Protocol 1, maintain minimum 15-foot distance at all times. No physical contact with container surface, chains, or seals. Protocol 2, no photography, video recording, or written documentation of Container 47 beyond standard manifest entries. Protocol 3, do not investigate sounds originating from the container. Report auditory phenomena to captain only. Protocol 4, if container door shows any separation from frame, greater than 1-inch gap, immediately retreat to crew quarters and notify captain via intercom. Do not approach. Protocol 5, biohazard cleaning protocol. If organic material appears on deck near Container 47, use only the sealed yellow bins stored in Hold 3. Wear full PPE. Incinerate materials immediately. Protocol 6, night watch personnel must conduct visual inspection of Container 47 every 90 minutes. Log temperature reading from 20-foot distance using IR thermometer. Acceptable range, 96 to 102 degrees Fahrenheit. Protocol 7. In event of catastrophic failure, container breach, chain failure, seal damage, abandoned ship protocol supersedes all other emergency procedures. I'd memorized them within a week, but reading them again feels different now. The words carry more weight, especially Protocol 4. Because last night, during my 0200 inspection round, the container door was open. Not fully open. Maybe 6 inches of black space between the door and frame. I stood there on the rain-slick deck, my flashlight beam shaking in my hand, and I couldn't move, couldn't think. The protocols screamed in my head. Retreat, notify the captain, but my legs had locked up. Something was looking out at me. I couldn't see its shape. The gap was too narrow, the darkness inside too complete. But I saw its eye. One massive eye, easily the size of a serving platter, with a pupil that contracted when my flashlight beam hit it. The iris was amber, streaked with black veins that pulsed with what looked like a heartbeat. It didn't blink, just stared at me, and I felt something crawl into my skull. Not thoughts exactly, more like raw sensation, a crushing loneliness. Hunger so profound it felt like my own stomach was eating itself. And underneath it all, rage. Ancient, patient rage that had been building for longer than I'd been alive. I don't remember running. I came back to myself in the crew quarters, my uniform soaked with rain and sweat, my hands shaking so badly I couldn't work the intercom button. "Captain," I finally managed. "Container 47, the door. I know." Vega's voice crackled through the speaker. "Stay in quarters. Don't come out until I give the all clear." I waited for 2 hours, listening to footsteps on the deck above, voices I didn't recognize, and a sound like heavy chains being tightened. When Vega finally opened the crew quarters door, he looked 10 years older. "What did you see?" he asked. "An eye," I said. Something was looking at me. He nodded slowly, like this wasn't news. "Did you touch the container?" "No." "Did you try to communicate with it?" "No, I just stood there." Vega exhaled, some tension leaving his shoulders. "Good. You followed Protocol 4. That's probably the only reason you're still sane." He pulled up a chair, sat down heavily. "The breathing sounds, you've heard them. Every night. They're getting worse, aren't they? Louder, more frequent." I nodded. "Day 1095, Vega said quietly. "That's what the manifest says." 3 years ago, Container 47 was loaded onto this ship in Portsmouth. We've been hauling it in circles ever since, Norfolk to Charleston to Jacksonville and back, over and over, never offloading it, never opening it, just keeping it contained. "What's inside?" I asked, even though I knew he couldn't tell me. Vega stood up, walked to the porthole, stared out at the black Atlantic. "Something that should have died a long time ago. Something that wants to die, but they won't let it." He turned back to me. "This morning, when we sealed the door back up, I found something carved into the metal. Looked burned in, like someone used a blowtorch to write it." He pulled out his phone, showed me a photo. The letters were crude, scorched into the orange paint. Day 1095. Still conscious, still hungry. Please let me die. How could something inside carve words on the outside? That's not the right question, Vega said. The right question is, what happens when we hit day 1096? If you like the stories, please hype the videos from a button like this just above the comment section. They helps the videos to get more reach and perform well. It would take just a few seconds and cost nothing, but would help the channel grow even faster. Thank you. Morning came with fog so thick I could barely see the bow from the bridge. The kind of fog that swallows sound and makes everything feel muffled, distant. I'd managed maybe an hour of sleep, my mind replaying that massive amber eye, the way it had stared through me like I was made of glass. My shift started at 0800, standard deck inspection, checking the cargo for any shifting during the night, making sure the chains were secure. I moved through the containers in the forward section first, checking tie downs and looking for any signs of stress on the metal. Everything routine. Until I reached row 12. The fog had thinned slightly, enough that I could see container 47 sitting in its usual spot. The chains looked intact. The government seal was still in place. But something was wrong with the deck. I moved closer, staying just outside the 15-foot perimeter, and my breath caught. Gouges. Deep gouges scraped into the steel deck plating, radiating out from the container in long parallel lines. 4 lines, each about 2 inches apart. Like someone had taken a giant rake and dragged it across the metal, except the grooves were too deep, too clean. This wasn't surface damage. These cuts went down a 1/4 inch into solid steel. The marks formed a rough circle around container 47, as if something inside had reached out during the night, testing the limits of its prison. I counted 12 sets of gouges, each one positioned at different points around the container. 12 attempts to escape. I pulled out my radio, hands shaking. "Captain Vega, this is Pritchard. You need to see this." He arrived within minutes, bringing the chief engineer, a quiet woman named Patricia Okafor, who'd been on the ship longer than anyone. She crouched down near one of the gouges, not touching it, just examining the metal with the kind of focus you'd give a crime scene. "These are fresh," she said. "Made within the last 6 hours. Look at the color of the exposed metal. No oxidation yet. No rust." "How strong would something have to be to do this?" I asked. Patricia looked up at me, then at Vega. "Hydraulic press. Industrial cutting equipment. That's what it would take. Nothing biological could generate this kind of force. And yet here we are," Vega said quietly. He walked the perimeter slowly, examining each set of marks. When he reached the container door, he stopped, knelt down, pulled a flashlight from his belt, and aimed it at the base of the door. "Danny," he said, "come here. Stay outside the 15 feet, but look at this." I approached carefully, my heart hammering against my ribs. Vega's flashlight illuminated something I'd missed in the fog. More words burned into the steel just below the handle. "Day 1, 1095. The chains are weakening. I can feel them. Soon." "Jesus Christ," Patricia whispered. She'd followed us over, standing at the edge of the safe zone. "It's communicating. Whatever's in there is aware enough to write messages." "It's been aware the whole time," Vega said. He stood up, turned to face both of us. "What I'm about to tell you doesn't leave this deck." "Understood." We both nodded. Container 47 has been in transit for longer than 3 years. Try 60 years. Since 1965. It's been on 12 different ships, moving between naval installations, never docking at civilian ports, never being opened. The current manifest says 3 years because that's when it was transferred to the Pacific Sentinel. But the thing inside, it's been in that box for 6 decades. The fog seemed to press in closer, making the air feel thick and hard to breathe. "What is it?" Patricia asked. Vega hesitated. "Project Amphitrite. That's the classification." Back in the Cold War, naval intelligence was experimenting with ways to create underwater operatives who could survive at extreme depths without equipment. Genetic modification, splicing human DNA with deep-sea organisms. They thought they could create super soldiers who could sabotage enemy submarines, plant mines, conduct reconnaissance in places no diver could reach. He paused, looking at the container like it was a coffin. The program ran for 8 years, 15 test subjects. 14 died during the modification process. Subject 15 survived, but what they created wasn't human anymore. It couldn't die. They tried. Starvation, dehydration, extreme temperatures, even lethal injection. Nothing worked. Its biology had changed too much, so they sealed it in a container and put it on a ship. The original plan was to keep it at sea until it died naturally. That was 60 years ago. My mouth had gone dry. You're telling me there's a person in there? Was a person, Vega corrected. Now it's something else. The modifications gave it enhanced strength, regenerative capabilities, and the ability to survive without food or water for extended periods. But they also destroyed its mind. The psychological reports from the early years describe violent psychotic episodes, periods of catatonia, and what the doctors called profound existential suffering. Patricia was staring at the gouges in the deck. If it's been in there for 60 years, how is it still alive? That's the problem, Vega said. The modifications were too effective. Its body won't let it die, even though its mind is gone. The Navy keeps it at sea because they're terrified of what would happen if it got loose on land. The breathing you hear at night, that's not sleep. That's consciousness. It's awake in there. Always awake. Always aware. For 60 years. I thought about the loneliness I'd felt when the eye looked at me. 60 years alone in a metal box, unable to die, unable to escape. Why tell us this now? I asked. Vega pulled out his phone again, pulled up another photo. This one showed a document, some kind of official Navy communication. I had to squint to read it in the fog. Transfer authorization, container 47. Destination, Naval Weapons Station, Charleston. Purpose, specimen termination, humanitarian grounds. Authorization code, Amphitrite final. Scheduled date, October 29th, 2024. That's tomorrow, Patricia said. Yes, Vega confirmed. After 60 years, someone finally got approval to end it. We dock in Charleston tomorrow morning. A medical team will be waiting. They're going to euthanize it. Finally. I should have felt relief. Instead, I felt a creeping dread spreading through my chest. What if it knows? Vega looked at me, and I saw the same fear in his eyes. What if it knows we're planning to kill it, and that's why it's trying to escape? Not to hurt us, not to run, just to make sure it happens, to make sure it finally dies before we can change our minds again. The fog shifted around us, and from somewhere deep inside container 47, I heard it. A long, shuddering breath that sounded almost like a sob. The rest of my shift passed in a haze. I went through the motions, checking cargo, logging inspection times, monitoring weather reports, but my mind kept returning to that sound, the sob, if that's what it was. By noon, the fog had burned off, leaving us under a pale October sun that did nothing to warm the deck. I ate lunch in the mess hall with Patricia and a few other crew members, but nobody talked much. Word had spread somehow. Not the full story. Vega had sworn us to secrecy about Project Amphitrite, but enough. Something was wrong with Container 47. People knew. Jenkins, one of the engine room techs, pushed his food around his plate. My cousin worked on a ship that hauled classified cargo. He said they had protocols too. Never told me what they were transporting, but he quit after 8 months. Said he couldn't sleep anymore. "This is different," Patricia said quietly. "How do you know?" She didn't answer, just stood up and left, her tray still half full. I finished eating and headed back to my cabin for my off-watch rest period. 4 hours of sleep before my night inspection round started. But when I lay down on my bunk, sleep wouldn't come. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that amber iris, felt that crushing loneliness pouring into my skull. Around 1600, my phone buzzed. Text from Vega. "Report to bridge. Now." I found him standing at the chart table with Patricia and 2 men I didn't recognize. They wore civilian clothes, jeans and windbreakers, but they had that military bearing you can't hide. Short haircuts, straight postures, eyes that scanned the room constantly. "Danny Pritchard. This is Dr. Michael Brennan and Dr. Lisa Huang," Vega said. "They're with Naval Medical Research. They flew in by helicopter an hour ago." Dr. Brennan extended his hand. He was maybe 50, with gray temples and deep lines around his eyes. "Mr. Pritchard, Captain Vega tells me you had direct visual contact with the specimen last night." "Specimen?" "I saw its eye," I said, "through the gap in the door." "Can you describe what you felt? Any psychological effects?" I hesitated, glancing at Vega. He nodded. "Loneliness," I said, "like drowning in it. And hunger, not food hunger. Something deeper. Like it wanted something it could never have." Dr. Huang was taking notes on a tablet. She was younger, maybe 35, with her hair pulled back in a tight bun. That's consistent with previous reports. The specimen retains some capacity for emotional projection. We believe it's a side effect of the genetic modifications. The deep-sea organisms we used have rudimentary telepathic abilities for hunting in darkness. "You're talking about it like it's an animal," I said. "But Captain Vega told us it was human once." Brennan's face hardened. "Was is the operative word. Subject 15 ceased being human in any meaningful sense around 1968. The psychological degradation was complete within 3 years of modification. What remains is biological. A living organism with human DNA, yes, but no consciousness as we understand it." "Then how is it writing messages?" Patricia asked from the doorway. None of us had heard her come in. The doctors exchanged glances. "We don't have a complete explanation for that," Huang admitted. "The most recent theories suggest the specimen has developed a kind of phantom consciousness, echoes of its original personality emerging during periods of extreme stress, like muscle memory, but psychological." "Bullshit," Patricia said flatly. "I read those messages. Still conscious. Please let me die. That's not muscle memory. That's someone suffering." "Ms. Okafor," Brennan started. "It's Chief Engineer Okafor," she cut him off. "And I want to know why it's taken 60 years to show mercy to something you created." Brennan's jaw tightened, but Huang put a hand on his arm. "She's right to be angry," Huang said quietly. "The project was a mistake. A terrible mistake. But we can't undo it. All we can do is end the suffering now." "Why tomorrow?" I asked. "Why not today? Why not right now?" "Legal authorization," Brennan said. "The termination protocol requires sign-off from 3 different departments, medical ethics review, and documented evidence of irreversible psychological deterioration. We've been compiling that evidence for 2 years. Tomorrow, we finally have all the signatures we need." Vega spoke up. "There's another problem. The specimen's temperature has been rising all day. Danny, show them your inspection logs." I pulled out my phone, opened the app where I logged the IR thermometer readings. Normal range was 96 to 102 degrees Fahrenheit. This morning at 0400, 98.1 degrees Fahrenheit. At 0800, 99.7 degrees Fahrenheit. At 1200, 101.8 degrees Fahrenheit. At 1600, just before I came to the bridge, 104.3 degrees Fahrenheit. That's fever range, Huang said, leaning forward to study the numbers. Has the specimen ever shown elevated temperature like this before? Not in the 3 years I've been captain, Vega said. I reviewed the historical logs. The temperature has always stayed within acceptable parameters. It knows, I said. Everyone turned to look at me. It knows you're planning to kill it tomorrow. That's why it tried to escape last night. That's why the temperature is rising. It's terrified you'll change your minds, that you'll keep it alive for another 60 years. Brennan shook his head. The specimen doesn't have the cognitive capacity to understand temporal concepts like tomorrow. It can't plan or anticipate. But it carved the date into the container, Patricia pointed out. Day 1095. It's counting. It knows how much time has passed. Silence filled the bridge, broken only by the hum of electronics and the distant crash of waves against the hull. We need to conduct a direct examination, Huang finally said. Visual confirmation of the specimen's condition before we proceed with termination tomorrow. The protocols forbid approaching the container, Vega said. The protocols were written for routine transport, not for end-of-life evaluation. Huang pulled a document from her bag, handed it to Vega. This authorizes a medical inspection. We need to verify the specimen is still viable. If it's already dying on its own, the termination procedure changes. Vega read the document, his face grave. When? Tonight, after dark. The specimen is more active during night hours. We'll get a better assessment of its condition. I don't like this, Patricia said. Neither do I, Vega agreed. But if it's a direct order. He looked at Brennan and Huang. You both understand that if something goes wrong, if the container breaches, we're implementing abandoned ship protocols. I won't risk my crew. Understood, Brennan said. We'll take full responsibility. Vega turned to me. Danny, I want you there during the inspection. You've had direct contact with the specimen. If it tries to communicate again, you might be able to interpret what it wants. My mouth went dry. Captain, I don't think... That's an order. I swallowed hard, nodded. Inspection begins at 2200 hours, Vega announced. Danny, Patricia, meet me on deck at 2145. Doctors, I'll show you where you can prep your equipment. He paused at the door, looked back at all of us. And someone should say a prayer, because I have a feeling tomorrow isn't going to go the way anyone expects. After they left, I stood alone on the bridge, watching the sun sink toward the horizon. In 6 hours, I'd be standing face to face with Container 47 again, with whatever lived inside it. My phone buzzed. Another temperature reading from the automated sensors. 106.8 degrees Fahrenheit. Rising. I spent the hours before the inspection in my cabin, trying to distract myself with a book I couldn't focus on. The words swam on the page. Every few minutes, I'd check the temperature logs on my phone, watching the numbers climb. 107.2 degrees Fahrenheit at 1800. 108.1 degrees Fahrenheit at 1900. 109.3 degrees Fahrenheit at 2000. Whatever was inside Container 47 was burning up. At 2130, I gave up on the book and headed to the deck. The night was clear, stars scattered across the sky like broken glass. The Atlantic stretched out in every direction, black and endless. We were 40 nautical miles from Charleston, scheduled to dock at 0700 tomorrow morning. Less than 9 hours until the termination protocol. Patricia was already there when I arrived, standing near the port rail with her arms crossed. She'd changed into work coveralls and steel-toed boots. "You ever wonder why they chose us?" she asked without looking at me. "What do you mean?" "The Pacific Sentinel." This crew. They could have put Container 47 on any vessel, military transport, submarine tender, aircraft carrier even. But they chose a civilian auxiliary with a mixed crew. Why? I hadn't thought about it. Plausible deniability? Maybe. She finally turned to face me. Or maybe they wanted people who'd follow orders without asking too many questions. Military personnel might push back, demand explanations. But civilian contractors? She shrugged. We need the paycheck. We stay quiet. Captain Vega approached from the superstructure, followed by Dr. Brennan and Dr. Huang. They'd both changed into white containment suits, the kind you see in biohazard labs. Brennan carried a heavy equipment case. Huang had a tablet and what looked like a medical scanner. "Status?" Vega asked. "Temperature is 109.7 degrees Fahrenheit, as of 5 minutes ago," I reported. "Still climbing." "That's approaching critical," Huang said, checking something on her tablet. "The specimen's normal metabolic rate shouldn't produce heat above 102 degrees. This suggests either an infection, which shouldn't be possible given its regenerative abilities, or extreme physiological stress." "Or it's dying," Patricia said quietly. "Possibly." Huang didn't sound convinced. Though previous attempts to induce death through environmental stress all failed. The specimen's biology is remarkably resilient. We walked toward row 12 in a tight group, our footsteps echoing off the metal deck. The closer we got to Container 47, the warmer the air became. By the time we reached the 15-foot perimeter, I could feel heat radiating off the container like standing near a furnace. The breathing sounds were louder tonight. Not the slow, rhythmic pattern I'd grown used to. This was labored, ragged, like someone running a marathon, and underneath it, a new sound, a low vibration that I felt in my teeth more than heard. "Jesus," Brennan whispered, "the structural integrity." He was right. Even in the darkness, I could see the container walls flexing with each breath. The metal bulged outward slightly, then contracted over and over. The chains were pulled taut, creaking under the strain. "This is a bad idea," Patricia said. "We should turn around right now." "We need the assessment," Huang insisted. She moved forward, stopping just at the edge of the perimeter. Raised her scanner and pointed it at the container. The device beeped, displaying readouts I couldn't interpret from my distance. "Core temperature 111.3 degrees Fahrenheit," she read aloud. "Heart rate 180 beats per minute. Respiratory rate 45 breaths per minute. Blood pressure." She stopped, looked at the scanner again, shook it. "That can't be right." "What?" Brennan asked. "Blood pressure reading is 240 over 160. That should cause immediate stroke or cardiac arrest in a normal human, but the specimen is." She looked up at the container, her face pale. "It's not dying. It's fighting." The elevated temperature, the increased heart rate. These are signs of extreme exertion. "Fighting what?" Vega demanded. Before Huang could answer, the breathing stopped. Complete silence. Even the ocean seemed to hold its breath. Then a voice came from inside the container, not projected into my head like last night. An actual voice, raw and broken, speaking through vocal cords that hadn't been used in decades. "Michael." Dr. Brennan staggered backward like he'd been struck. No, that's not possible. "Michael Brennan." The voice was thick, wet, struggling to form words. "You were there, 1967. You held the syringe. You said it wouldn't hurt." Brennan's face had gone white. "The specimen doesn't have language capability. The reports all said, you lied." The voice cracked, dissolved into something between a laugh and a sob. 60 years. 60 years awake. Do you know what that does? Do you know what I've become? "Who are you?" Huang called out, her voice shaking. "What's your name?" Silence. Then, Daniel Pritchard, Lieutenant, United States Navy, service number 4739201. Date of enlistment, June 12th, 1965. The deck seemed to tilt under my feet. Pritchard, my last name. "That's impossible," I heard myself say. "That's my name." "Your grandfather," the voice said, and now I could hear something like recognition in it. "Robert Pritchard, he had a son, and that son had a son, Daniel." A pause, filled with labored breathing. "You look like him. When you shined the light through the gap, I saw his face, my father's face." My knees gave out. I sat down hard on the deck, my mind refusing to process what I was hearing. My grandfather died in 1967. Training accident at sea. That's what my father told me. "No accident," the voice said. "Volunteered. They asked for volunteers. Said we'd be heroes. Said we'd change the course of the war. I believed them. I let them. Change me. Turn me into this." Patricia had her hand over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Vega stood rigid, his captains bearing the only thing keeping him upright. Brennan had collapsed against a nearby container, his containment suit crinkling loudly in the silence. "The program was classified," Huang said, but her voice was weak. "The subjects' families were told. We couldn't tell them the truth." "Truth." The voice laughed again, bitter and broken. "Truth is, I've been conscious every day for 21,915 days. I've felt every second, every minute. I've counted them all. The modifications won't let me sleep, won't let me forget, won't let me go insane enough to stop feeling it." The container's walls flexed again, harder this time. One of the chains snapped, the metal link exploding with a sound like a gunshot. Everyone jumped back except me. I couldn't move, couldn't look away. "Tomorrow," the voice said. "Michael came to kill me tomorrow. Finally, after 60 years. But tonight I felt something I hadn't felt since 1967. Tonight, when Danny looked at me, when I saw my father's face in his eyes, I felt hope. And hope is worse than despair. Because hope means I might survive tomorrow. Hope means this might never end." Another chain snapped, then another. "Captain," Patricia said urgently, "we need to leave, now." But I was standing, walking forward, toward the 15-foot line, toward my grandfather's voice. "Danny, stop!" Vega grabbed my arm, pulled me back. "I'm sorry," I called out. "I'm so sorry they did this to you. I'm sorry nobody stopped them. I'm sorry it took 60 years. "Not your fault," the voice said, softer now. "But Danny, when they open this container tomorrow, when they see what I've become, don't look. Promise me, don't look. I don't want you to remember me like this. Tell your father. Tell him I'm sorry. Sorry I couldn't come home." The final chain snapped. The container door didn't open. But through the gap, I saw that amber eye again, now filled with something that might have been gratitude. "Thank you," my grandfather whispered, "for being here." At the end, "Everyone back to the superstructure," Vega ordered. "That's a direct command." Nobody moved. We were all staring at the container, at the broken chains lying across the deck like dead snakes. "Captain," Huang said, her voice hollow, "if the container breaches, Protocol 7 states—" "I know what the protocol states." Vega's radio crackled. He pulled it from his belt. "Bridge, this is the captain. Prepare abandon ship procedures. All hands to muster stations. This is not a drill." The radio squawked in response. Footsteps thundered through the superstructure as the crew mobilized. But I couldn't move. My grandfather was 10 feet away from me, trapped in a metal box, burning from the inside out. "How long have you known?" I asked Dr. Brennan. He was still slumped against the adjacent container, his face slack with shock. "How long have you known he was my grandfather?" I didn't. Brennan's voice was barely audible. The records were sealed. Subject 15 was only ever referenced by number in all the documents I accessed. I didn't know his real name until right now. "Liar," Patricia spat. "You expect us to believe you've been studying this project for years and never looked up the subject's identity?" "The files were redacted," Huang interjected. "Part of the security protocol. We only learned subject names during the termination authorization process, and even then only first names and service numbers. We had no idea there was a family connection to anyone on this vessel." I turned to Vega. "Did you know?" He met my eyes. "Not until 2 days ago. When the transfer authorization came through, it included a classified addendum. The Navy's been tracking descendants of all Project Amphitrite subjects. They knew you were Robert Pritchard's grandson when they hired you. They wanted family present for the termination." "Why?" The word came out strangled. "Closure," they said. "The right of family to be present at end of life." "But I think—" Vega looked at the container. "I think they wanted a witness. Someone who could verify that what they did 60 years ago actually happened. Someone who couldn't be dismissed as a conspiracy theorist or unreliable source." "That's manipulative as hell," Patricia said. "That's the military," Vega replied bitterly. From inside the container, my grandfather's breathing had changed again. Slower now. Deeper. Like someone preparing for something. "The temperature is dropping," Huang reported, checking her scanner. 108.9 degrees. 108.1. It's cooling down rapidly. "What does that mean?" I asked. "I don't know. The specimen has never exhibited this kind of thermal regulation before. It's almost like—" She paused, adjusting the scanner settings. "Like it's conserving energy. Preparing." "Preparing for what?" Patricia asked. As if in answer, the container door shifted. Not opening, just settling back into its frame with a metallic groan. The broken chains lay motionless on the deck. "He's sealing himself back in," I said. "He doesn't want to escape." "He never did." "Danny." My grandfather's voice came again, weaker than before. "I need you to understand something. When they modified me, they didn't just change my body. They changed how I perceive time. Minutes feel like hours. Hours feel like weeks. For you, 60 years passed. For me, it's been much longer. Centuries, maybe. I've lost count." He stopped, coughed wetly. When he continued, his voice was barely a whisper. "I've had time to think. About what they did. Why they did it. And I've realized something. The deep-sea creatures they spliced into me, they're ancient, older than human civilization. They've existed in darkness for millions of years, and they've developed ways to survive that we can't comprehend. When they put that DNA into me, I inherited more than just physical traits. I inherited memory, genetic memory. That's not scientifically possible, Brennan said, but he sounded uncertain. I remember the Mariana Trench. My grandfather continued, ignoring him. I remember pressure that would crush submarines like tin cans. I remember hunting in absolute darkness, where the only light comes from your own body. I remember being alone for so long, the time becomes meaningless. And the worst part? I remember being human. I remember my wife, Sarah. I remember holding Robert when he was born. I remember thinking I was doing something heroic, something that mattered. And I have to live with both sets of memories, human and creature, fighting each other inside my head every second of every day for 60 years. Tears were running down my face. I didn't bother wiping them away. Tomorrow, when Michael opens this container, he's going to see what those modifications did to me. He's going to see something that should never have existed, and I need you to document it. All of it. Not for revenge or justice, for prevention. So this never happens to anyone else. The program was shut down in 1973. Huang said. There were no other survivors. Silence from the container. Then, you're lying. I can feel them. Other containers, other specimens. Not on this ship, but somewhere. I felt their minds touching mine across the water. Dreams that aren't my dreams. Pain that isn't my pain. They're out there. And they're suffering just like me. Huang and Brennan exchanged looks. Huang's face had gone pale. Tell him, Patricia demanded. Tell him the truth. Brennan stood slowly, walked to the edge of the 15-foot perimeter. Project Amphitrite had 2 phases. Phase 1 was the genetic modification program, 1965 to 1973. That's what you were part of. 15 subjects, 14 fatalities, 1 survivor. Phase 2 began in 1974, after we'd learned from our mistakes. Better genetic sequencing, more stable modification protocols, improved psychological conditioning, 24 new subjects. All of them survived. All of them are currently in containment. Oh my God, I whispered. They're stable, Brennan insisted. None of them have developed the psychological deterioration that Subject 15 experienced. They're military assets, not failed experiments. Assets, my grandfather repeated, and there was something like rage in his voice. The container walls flexed again. You turned 24 more people into weapons, after you saw what it did to me. After 60 years of evidence that this procedure is torture. They volunteered, Huang said quietly, with full knowledge of the risks. Did they know they'd never be allowed to die? My grandfather asked. Did they know that once the modifications took hold, they'd be government property for the rest of their functionally immortal lives? Did you tell them that? Neither doctor answered. Patricia pulled out her phone. I'm recording this. Every word. If you try to stop me or confiscate this phone, I will upload it to every news outlet I can find before you take it. That's classified information, Brennan said. Then arrest me. Take me to court. Explain to a judge why the United States Navy has been keeping human beings in shipping containers for 60 years. Vega stepped forward. She's right. This needs to come out. All of it. The families of those subjects deserve to know what happened to their loved ones. You don't understand what you're suggesting, Huang said. The strategic implications alone. I don't care about strategy, I interrupted. I care about my grandfather, who's been locked in that box since my father was 2 years old. I care about the 24 other people you've done this to, and I care about making sure it stops." From inside the container came a sound I hadn't heard before. Something that might have been a laugh, or might have been a sob. "Good," my grandfather said. "Good. Make them listen, make them see. And Danny, tell your father I loved him. Tell him I didn't abandon him. Tell him I fought every day to come home, and when I couldn't, I fought to die. For 60 years, I fought to die. Tomorrow, I finally win." The breathing steadied. The temperature reading on Huang's scanner showed 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. Normal human body temperature. "He's stabilizing," she said, confusion clear in her voice. "His vitals are returning to baseline. I don't understand." "He's letting go," Vega said quietly. "Now that he knows someone will tell his story, now that he knows it meant something, he's letting go." We stood there in silence, watching the container. The deck lights cast long shadows across the broken chains. Somewhere in the distance, I could hear the crew at muster stations, waiting for orders that wouldn't come. We weren't abandoning ship. Not tonight. After 20 minutes, Huang checked her scanner again. "Heart rate is slowing. 60 beats per minute. 50-40 inches. "He's dying," Brennan said. "No," I corrected. "He's finally being allowed to die." "There's a difference." We waited. The stars wheeled overhead. The Atlantic rolled beneath us. And inside Container 47, my grandfather's breathing grew slower and slower, until somewhere around 0100 hours, it stopped completely. Huang stared at her scanner. Cardiac arrest. No respiratory activity. Core temperature dropping rapidly. He's gone. I sank down to the deck, my back against a container, and let myself cry. Not just for my grandfather. For all of them. 15 subjects in Phase 1. 24 in Phase 2. 39 people turned into weapons, into specimens, into things the government could seal away and forget about. But we wouldn't forget. Not anymore. "We dock in Charleston in 6 hours, Vega said. "When we do, those doctors can examine the body, file their reports, close their files. But first, we're going to make copies of everything. Patricia's recording, my captain's logs, Danny's testimony, all of it. And we're going to find someone who will listen." "There's still the other 24, Patricia said. "We need to find them." "We will," I promised. "We'll find every single one." We docked in Charleston at 0647 hours, 18 minutes ahead of schedule. The sun was just breaking over the harbor, painting the water gold and orange. It should have been beautiful. Instead, it felt like arriving at a funeral. 3 vehicles waited at the pier. 2 were standard Navy cargo trucks. The third was a gray sedan with tinted windows and government plates. 4 men in suits stood beside it, scanning the ship as we approached. "Intelligence," Vega muttered from beside me on the deck. "They're here to make sure we keep quiet." I'd spent the last 5 hours in the bridge with Vega, Patricia, and the 2 doctors, copying files and uploading Patricia's recording to 3 separate cloud storage accounts. Brennan and Huang had cooperated. Whether out of guilt or pragmatism, I couldn't tell. But they'd given us access to their tablets, their research notes, everything they had on Project Amphitrite. The files were worse than I'd imagined. Detailed medical records of the modifications, psychological evaluations documenting the subject's deterioration, cost-benefit analyses treating human beings like equipment. And at the bottom of one folder, A file labeled Phase 2, Current Status. 24 names, 24 people who were still alive, still in containment, scattered across naval installations from San Diego to Yokosuka. I'd photographed every page. The gangway went down. Captain Vega descended first, meeting the men in suits at the bottom. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I could see Vega's posture stiffen, his hands clench into fists. "This is going to get ugly," Patricia said. She was standing next to me, her phone gripped tight. "They're not going to let us just walk away with this information. They can't stop all of us," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. Dr. Huang appeared at my other side. She'd removed her containment suit, back in her civilian clothes. She looked exhausted. "I need you to understand something," she said quietly. "When this comes out, and it will come out, there will be consequences. Not just for the Navy, for the families. Your father, he's going to learn that his dad didn't die in a training accident. He's going to learn his dad spent 60 years in a container, suffering. Are you prepared for that?" "Is he prepared to never know the truth?" I countered. "My whole life, I thought my grandfather was a hero who died serving his country. At least now I know he actually was a hero. Just not the way the Navy wanted him to be." Huang nodded slowly. "You're stronger than I thought. Both of you." She looked at Patricia. "What you're doing is going to cost you your careers, maybe more. The people who approved Project Amphitrite, who have kept it running for 60 years, they're not going to take exposure well." "Then they should have thought of that before turning people into experiments," Patricia said flatly. Below us, the conversation between Vega and the suits was getting heated. One of them was pointing at the ship, gesturing sharply. Vega shook his head, crossed his arms. "We should get down there," I said. The three of us descended the gangway together. As we reached the pier, one of the suits stepped forward. He was maybe 45, with salt and pepper hair and the kind of face that had been trained not to show emotion. "Daniel Pritchard?" he asked. "Yes." "Special Agent Carson, Naval Criminal Investigative Service. I need to speak with you about last night's incident with Container 47. "Incident," I repeated. "That's what you're calling it?" "Mr. Pritchard, I understand you're upset, but there are protocols for handling classified information, and what you witnessed last night falls under—" "My grandfather died last night," I cut him off. "After 60 years of torture that your agency helped cover up. So forgive me if I don't give a damn about your protocols." Carson's expression didn't change, but something flickered behind his eyes. "Your grandfather. So Dr. Brennan informed you of Subject 15's identity. Subject 15 had a name, Lieutenant Daniel Pritchard, United States Navy. And he wasn't the only one, was he? There are 24 more, still alive, still suffering." The other three agents moved closer, forming a loose circle around us. Carson held up a hand, stopping them. "Mr. Pritchard, I'm going to ask you once to voluntarily surrender any recordings, photographs, or documents related to Project Amphitrite. If you cooperate, this can be handled quietly. If you don't—" He let the threat hang in the air. "If we don't, what?" Patricia demanded. "You'll arrest us?" "On what charges? Documenting crimes against humanity? Exposing violations of the Geneva Convention?" "Espionage Act," Carson said simply. "Unauthorized disclosure of classified national security information. 5 to 10 years in federal prison. Each." I forced myself to stay calm. "Then I guess you'll have to arrest us." "Because we're not giving you anything." Carson studied me for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone, made a call. "Sir, we have a situation at Charleston. The crew is non-compliant. He listened. Yes, sir. All of them, and they've made copies. Another pause. Understood. He ended the call, pocketed his phone. When he looked at us again, something in his face had changed. Not quite sympathy, but something close. That was the Deputy Director of Naval Intelligence, he said. He's authorized me to offer you a deal. You surrender all copies of the classified materials. You sign non-disclosure agreements. And in exchange, the Navy will convene an independent ethics review of Project Amphitrite. If violations are found, they'll take appropriate action. Appropriate action, Vega scoffed. You mean a quiet, internal investigation that goes nowhere and changes nothing? I mean congressional oversight, Carson said. Full disclosure to the Senate Armed Services Committee. Public testimony from the Phase 2 subjects if they're willing, and victim compensation for the families of Phase 1 subjects. We all stared at him. Why? I asked. Why would they agree to that? Carson glanced at the container ship, then back at us. Because someone high up in the chain of command just realized that Project Amphitrite is a scandal waiting to explode. Better to control the narrative, release the information on their terms, than to have it leak and turn into a media circus. Plus, he hesitated. Off the record, a lot of us in NCIS have known about Amphitrite for years. We've wanted to shut it down, but we didn't have the evidence or the authorization. You just gave us both. How do we know you're not lying? Patricia asked. You don't, Carson admitted. But you've already made backups, haven't you? Uploaded the files somewhere we can't access them. So even if we arrest you, even if we confiscate your phones, the evidence still exists, which means the Navy's only real option is to get ahead of the story. He pulled out a business card, handed it to me. That's my direct line. You have 72 hours to decide. Either way, those 24 Phase 2 subjects are getting medical evaluations this week. If any of them want to end their service, we'll honor that. I looked at Vega, at Patricia, at Dr. Juan and Dr. Brennan, who'd been standing silently through the whole exchange. We want it in writing, Vega said. Congressional oversight, public testimony, compensation, all of it, signed by someone with actual authority. You'll have it by tomorrow, Carson said, but I need your word that you won't release anything until after the ethics review concludes. Give us a chance to do this right. How long? I asked. 6 months, maybe less. And if the review is a whitewash, if you try to bury it, Carson met my eyes. Then you release everything, and I'll personally testify that the Navy had a chance to come clean and chose not to. I've got 20 years until retirement. I can afford to burn some bridges. It wasn't trust exactly, but it was something, a chance to expose Project Amphitrite without destroying our lives in the process. 24 hours, I said. We'll give you our answer in 24 hours. Carson nodded. That's fair. In the meantime, you're free to go. No surveillance, no restrictions. But Mr. Pritchard, he paused. Your grandfather's remains are being transferred to the medical research facility here at Charleston. If you want to be present for the examination, we can arrange that. And if you want to claim the body afterward, for a proper burial, we'll approve it. Thank you. The agents withdrew to their sedan. The Navy trucks began loading equipment from the ship, and I stood on the Charleston pier, watching the sun climb higher in the sky, thinking about my grandfather's final words. Tell your father I loved him. I pulled out my phone, found my dad's number. He'd be at work right now, teaching high school history in Richmond. But this couldn't wait. The phone rang 3 times before he picked up. "Danny? You okay? You don't usually call during—" "Dad," I said, my voice breaking. "We need to talk. It's about Grandpa Daniel, about how he really died." Silence on the other end. Then, "What do you mean, how he really died? Can you take tomorrow off? Drive down to Charleston? There's something I need to show you. Something you need to know." Another pause. "This is serious, isn't it?" "Yeah, Dad. It's serious. But it's also... it's important. He'd want you to know." "Okay," my father said. "I'll be there tomorrow morning." "Danny, is he really gone?" I looked at the Pacific Sentinel, at Container 47 still secured on its deck. "Yeah," I whispered, "but he's finally at peace." The Naval Medical Research Facility in Charleston occupies a squat concrete building 3 blocks from the harbor. From the outside, it looks like any other government office. Bland, institutional, forgettable. Inside, it's a maze of sterile corridors and locked doors, each one requiring higher security clearance than the last. Agent Carson escorted me through security at 1400 hours. My father had arrived an hour earlier, driving down from Richmond through the night. We'd spent the morning in a conference room while Vega, Patricia, and I explained everything to him. He'd listened in silence, his face growing paler with each detail, until finally he'd just put his head in his hands and wept. Now we walked together down a white hallway, following Carson to the examination room where my grandfather's body had been taken. Dad hadn't said much since we left the conference room, just kept his hand on my shoulder gripping tight, like he was afraid I might disappear too. "Before we go in," Carson said, stopping outside a heavy metal door, "I need to prepare you for what you're going to see. The modifications Subject 15, Lieutenant Pritchard, underwent were extensive. His appearance is not human, not anymore." "I need to see him," my father said. His voice was steady, but I could hear the tremor underneath. "Whatever he looks like, he's my father. I need to see him." Carson nodded, swiped his badge, and opened the door. The examination room was large, clinical, dominated by a steel table in the center. And on that table, covered by a white sheet, was a form too large to be human. Dr. Huang was already there, along with 2 other medical personnel I didn't recognize. She looked up when we entered, her expression carefully neutral. "Mr. Pritchard," she said to my father, "I'm Dr. Lisa Huang. I'm very sorry for your loss." Dad just nodded, his eyes fixed on the sheet. "Would you like me to explain what we found during the preliminary examination?" Huang asked. "Show me first," Dad said, "then explain." Huang hesitated, then nodded. She moved to the table and slowly pulled back the sheet. I'd thought I was prepared. I wasn't. My grandfather's body was roughly humanoid, but that's where the similarities ended. His skin had taken on a translucent quality, like deep-sea creatures that never see sunlight. Bioluminescent spots dotted his torso and limbs, still faintly glowing even in death. His limbs were elongated, the bones restructured for swimming rather than walking. Each hand had 6 fingers, webbed, ending in black claws that matched the gouges we'd found on the deck. But his face was the worst. It retained enough human features to be recognizable. A nose, a mouth, eyes. But everything was stretched, distorted. His eyes were 3 times normal size, with those amber irises I had seen through the gap. His mouth extended too far, revealing rows of needle-sharp teeth designed for gripping prey in darkness. And yet, despite everything, I could see traces of the man in the old photographs my father kept. The shape of the skull, the line of the jaw. My grandfather was still in there, somewhere beneath the modifications. My father made a sound, not quite a sob, not quite a gasp. He moved forward, reached out, then pulled his hand back. "It's okay," Huang said gently. "You can touch him." Dad's hand shook as he placed it on my grandfather's arm. The translucent skin was cold, lifeless. Dad traced the bioluminescent spots, tears running down his face. "I remember him," he said quietly. "I was only 2 when he left, but I remember him throwing me in the air, making me laugh. Mom used to say I had his smile." He looked at Juan. "Is there anything human left? After all these modifications? More than there should be," Huang said. She pulled up an X-ray on a nearby monitor. The genetic modifications altered approximately 78% of his cellular structure. But his brain, specifically the cerebral cortex and hippocampus, retained significant human architecture. He should have lost all higher cognitive function, all memory, all sense of self. But he didn't. He remembered you. He remembered his life. And he suffered for it. "How is that possible?" I asked. "We don't know," Huang admitted. "The deep-sea organisms we used as genetic donors have primitive nervous systems. They shouldn't have been able to integrate with human neurology in a way that preserved consciousness. But Lieutenant Pritchard's brain adapted in ways we never predicted. He became something new, something that shouldn't exist." She paused. "In my professional opinion, keeping him alive for 60 years was an act of prolonged torture. The fact that he retained his sanity as long as he did is remarkable." "He didn't retain his sanity," Dad said, still looking at the body. "Not really. He just got good at pretending. That's what I would have done." We stood there in silence, the 3 of us looking at what the Navy had made of Lieutenant Daniel Pritchard. After a while, Carson cleared his throat. "I have updates," he said, "if you're ready to hear them." I tore my eyes away from my grandfather. "Go ahead." "The deputy director has authorized the ethics review. It's being fast-tracked. We're looking at 3 months instead of 6, and we've started evaluating the Phase 2 subjects. As of this morning, 7 of them have requested termination. Under the new protocols, we're granting those requests." 7, I repeated. "What about the other 17? Carson shifted uncomfortably. "They want to continue serving. They believe their modifications serve a purpose. They've been told they can leave at any time, but they've chosen to stay." "Have they been told what happened to the Phase 1 subjects?" Patricia asked. She'd followed us in, standing near the door. "Do they know what they're really signing up for?" "They're being fully briefed this week," Carson said, "including being shown footage of Lieutenant Pritchard's condition. If any of them change their minds after that, the Navy will honor it." "And compensation?" Vega asked. He'd come in behind Patricia, his captain's uniform exchanged for civilian clothes. $1 million per Phase 1 family. To be paid out immediately, with a full written apology from the Secretary of the Navy. "Your family will receive that payment, Mr. Pritchard." Carson looked at my father. "It won't bring him back. It won't undo what was done. But it's something." Dad laughed bitterly. $1 million. That's what they think 60 years of torture is worth. "It's a starting point," Carson said. "The congressional hearings might result in additional compensation. But more importantly, it's an admission of guilt, of wrongdoing, that matters legally." "What about the story?" I asked. "Can we tell people what really happened?" Carson pulled out a document, handed it to me. After the ethics review concludes, you'll be free to discuss Project Amphitrite publicly. No NDAS, no restrictions. The Navy wants to get ahead of this, which means controlled disclosure through official channels first. Then you can talk to whoever you want. Media, books, documentaries, whatever helps you tell your grandfather's story. I looked down at the document. It was dense with legal language, but the core message was clear. In 3 months, we could expose everything. One more thing, Huang said. She moved to a cabinet, pulled out a small container. When we examined Lieutenant Pritchard's body, we found this, in a sealed pocket in his chest cavity. The modifications had grown tissue around it, protecting it. She opened the container. Inside was a dog tag, tarnished but intact, and underneath it, a photograph sealed in plastic. The image was faded but still visible. A young man in a Navy uniform, a woman beside him, and a small child, maybe 2 years old, sitting on the man's shoulders. He kept it, Huang said softly. Through everything, through all the modifications, all the suffering, he kept this photograph of his family. Dad took the container with shaking hands, stared at the photo. "That's Mom," he whispered, "and me." I remember that day, the Navy pier in Norfolk, right before he shipped out. He looked up at me, his face streaming with tears. He never forgot us. In 60 years, locked in that container, he never forgot. I put my arm around my father's shoulders, and we stood together, looking at the photograph, at the man my grandfather had been before the Navy turned him into something else. A husband, a father, a hero who'd volunteered to serve his country and paid a price no one should ever have to pay. "We'll tell his story," I promised. "Everyone will know what he sacrificed. What all of them sacrificed." Carson nodded. "I'll make sure of it." "That's a promise." Outside the examination room, I could hear the sounds of the facility continuing its work. Research, experiments, the machinery of military science grinding forward. But in this room, for this moment, we'd stop to remember one man, to acknowledge what had been done to him, to promise it would never happen again. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But it was a start. The congressional hearing was scheduled for April 15th. I'd spent the previous weeks preparing testimony, reviewing documents, meeting with the families of other Phase 1 subjects. 14 families, most of them still believing their loved ones had died in training accidents or overseas deployments. Telling them the truth was harder than facing my grandfather in that container. My father handled the funeral arrangements. We buried what remained of Lieutenant Daniel Pritchard in Arlington National Cemetery with full military honors. The Navy didn't object. Carson made sure of that. At the service, a 3-star admiral read a letter of apology from the Secretary of the Navy. My father accepted it without comment, then walked away. The Phase 2 subjects were another story. 7 had chosen termination and were laid to rest in various cemeteries across the country. The remaining 17 continued their service, though now with regular psychological evaluations and the explicit right to end their contracts at any time. I'd met 2 of them during the ethics review. They were different from my grandfather, more stable, more comfortable with what they'd become. Whether that was better or worse, I couldn't say. Patricia and I resigned from the Pacific Sentinel in February. Vega followed in March, unable to continue after everything we'd seen. The ship itself was reassigned to standard cargo routes. Container 47 was incinerated, along with all the equipment used to house my grandfather. The Navy wanted no physical evidence remaining, but we had copies of everything. The night before my congressional testimony, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about those last words my grandfather had said through the container door. about hope being worse than despair, about surviving when you desperately wanted to die. Around 200, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Mr. Pritchard. A woman's voice, professional but strained. This is Commander Jessica Walsh, Naval Medical Research. I apologize for calling so late, but there's something you need to know before tomorrow's hearing. What is it? We conducted a final audit of Project Amphitrite's facilities, checking manifests against actual container inventory, and we found a discrepancy. I sat up in bed, suddenly wide awake. What kind of discrepancy? The official records show 24 Phase 2 subjects, but we found 23 containers. She paused. One is missing. Has been missing for approximately 8 months. The tracking data was falsified to hide the absence. Jesus Christ, which one? Subject 24. Real name, Michael Chen, former Marine Corps reconnaissance. Enhanced for deep water infiltration missions. Last confirmed location was Naval Base San Diego. Current whereabouts unknown. How does something like that just disappear? We're investigating. But Mr. Pritchard. Subject 24 was one of the most stable Phase 2 specimens. High intelligence, excellent psychological scores, fully cooperative. If he's gone missing, it's because he chose to leave. And if he chose to leave... Walsh's voice faltered. We don't know what he's capable of or what he might do. I thought about my grandfather, about 60 years of containment, about consciousness stretched across decades of isolation. Maybe he just wants to be free. Maybe, Walsh said, or maybe he's planning something. We've assigned a task force to locate him, but so far there's been no trace. No sightings, no evidence, nothing. It's like he vanished into the ocean. Why are you telling me this? Because tomorrow, when you testify, you'll be exposing Project Amphitrite to the world. And when that happens, Subject 24 will know that people are looking for him. He'll know he's been exposed. She paused. I need you to be prepared for the possibility that he might reach out. To you specifically. Because you're Lieutenant Pritchard's grandson. Because you're the one telling the story. What would he want from me? Honestly, we don't know. But Mr. Pritchard, be careful. Subject 24 has capabilities your grandfather never developed. He's smarter, stronger, more adapted. If he sees you as a threat or an opportunity, you need to be ready. She hung up before I could respond. I sat in the darkness, my phone still pressed to my ear, thinking about 23 containers. 23 specimens accounted for, and one missing, somewhere in the world, capable of things I couldn't imagine. The hearing was in 8 hours. I'd tell Congress everything about Project Amphitrite, expose decades of secrets, and hopefully prevent it from ever happening again. But somewhere out there, Subject 24 was watching, waiting. And I had no idea what he wanted.